Hey friends, it's Cassie and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we are actually going to be using the January 2021 Simon Says Stamp Card Kit. It is sold out, but I'm going to try and link everything down below that is sold separately. And I know it's been a hot minute since I have done these kits, but I'm excited. So let's talk about what comes in this kit. We've got some awesome craft tacky glue. This is made by Simon Says Stamp. We also have some unicorn confetti glitter. We have the ELIZA Snowflake die by Simon Says Stamp. And then we have 4 envelopes in white, dull pink, metallic sea glass, and holographic. Gorgeous. I think I'm going to have to get some of that holographic. Then we have the coupon code. And then we have some of this Whimsy Stamps designer paper. Now, I have not ever had anything by Whimsy Stamps. I know that's a shocker, but this stuff is stunning, and it's double-sided, super, super pretty. I'm going to show you how we can make some mini slimline cards using these, and don't mind the boys are having a fit running through the hallway. That's what you hear is the jingling in the background. But aren't those papers just beautiful? Oh my goodness. Love those. And that was called Blurry Flurries. And then we have this very cool Simon Says Stamp Filigree Snowflake embossing folder. And I believe it's like a 3D folder. You definitely want to check out your die cutting machine's instructions on how to use that. And then we have this beautiful 6x8 Snowflake season stamp set. It is just beautiful. You always get an idea sheet, and then we have some cardstock. That cardstock comes in that silver holographic copper design, absolutely pretty. And then we have lavender, dull pink, and sea glass. All right, let's get to making stuff. Now, I told you we were going to be making a mini slimline. We're actually going to be making a few, but this paper is perfect for it. 6x6 paper is just perfect for it because that's what you need for a mini slimline, because when they're closed, they measure 3 inches by 6 inches. So I just took one of those pieces of paper and scored it at 3 inches and then burnished it to make sure that it was, nice and scored. What I'm doing next is I'm taking some 1/2 inch Scor-Tape. I'm lining it up on my glass mat. I'm going to put that all across that front panel. And then I'm going to trim off all the excess. We are going to use that unicorn confetti, which is basically a very chunky glitter. It's so pretty and very chunky, and I love that kind of stuff. I like glitter anyway, but you make it chunky and I don't know. I like it. So I have my coffee filter down, and I'm just going to pour that unicorn confetti right over the top of the Scor-Tape and just collect it into the coffee filter. It's just one of the easier ways to get all that. And then I'm just going to use a paintbrush that I have, a dry one, and I'm going to wipe away any of the excess confetti that's around the Scor-Tape. I'm not going to really mess with the Scor-Tape just yet. I'm just going to wipe away some of that excess so I don't have too much of a mess. But don't worry, I'll make a mess here. Trying to put it away, I dump it all over the glass mat. But because it's confetti and not just like regular glitter, it's easy to pick up just with your fingers, and it really doesn't make too much of a mess. If that had been glitter, it'd have been like, well, that's gone forever. So moving on, I am now going to do some burnishing. So I kept the release paper from the Scor-Tape, and I'm going to use my ergonomic bone folder that I have. Any bone folder would work. And I'm just going to burnish that in. And then I'll take that dry paintbrush and I'll wipe away any of the excess glitter, even going over the top of the Scor-Tape area. So that way, if it wasn't stuck to the Scor-Tape, it'll come off of there and we can put away any of that excess. And then our panel is all ready to go. The next step is to do some stamping. So I'm going to take that big circle stamp that came on the stamp set that says "Hello Friend," and I'm going to put this into my MISTI because I wasn't sure how easily this would stamp, but it sure stamped beautifully. I'm going to pull out some Ink on 3 Trinity Teal because that matched that patterned paper beautifully. I'll stamp that down, and then I went through my stash of stuff and I found this awesome Heffy Doodle. It's the stitched circle die. It doesn't match perfectly, but it gives this beautiful stitching around it, so it was perfect for me. And then I pulled out my Heffy Doodle mini die cutting machine and just ran that through there. And then this is what I have. So go through your stash and look and see what you have. You might have some circle dies that would work perfectly. I'll pull out that craft tacky glue that came in the kit. I sort of have a love-hate relationship with this kind of glue. Sometimes mine clogs. I don't really appreciate that. But I do like that you can set it upside down and that glue is always there, so you don't have to squeeze too hard to try and get some out, unless it's clogged, of course. And so I just put a panel on the inside so it would be easy to write. I did put some foam tape on the back of my circle, and then I'm just going to stick that right on that lower right-hand corner over the top of some of that unicorn confetti Scor-Tape that I have. And then this is going to finish off our first card. It's simple, but I love the way that turned out. And you have this really pretty mini slimline. Perfect. All right, now we'll move on to card number 2, which is another really easy one. I went ahead and die cut out the ELIZA Snowflake. It's a very intricate die, so I suggest you may need a shim. Try it out with your machine and see what works, but I needed a shim. I'm going to take some more of that pattern paper and I'm going to trim this down to be 4 inches by 5.5, so it's going to have a little bit of a border on each side for an A2 size card. I am going to use the embossing folder with this. Like I said before, check the instructions on your machine. You could break your machine if you don't, because this is not like a regular embossing folder, so check your manufacturer's instructions. So I ran that through my die cutting machine, and here's what we have. It's got this beautiful embossing, great texture. So the next thing I want to do is expose that texture. So I'm going to take this ink on 3, my Jam Purple, and I'm just going to lightly rub it over the top. It'll hit all those raised areas and kind of in between a little bit, so it gives this grunge look, which is really cool, and then exposes the embossed area a little bit better. And now I will get a card panel or a card base ready to go, which is going to be some of that lavender cardstock that came in the kit. This will just be a side folding A2 size card. I'm going to stamp out my sentiment onto a scrap of white cardstock using some blackout ink by Ink on 3. And then I'll trim this down with my guillotine trimmer. It just worked out that I happened to stamp it fairly straight, so kudos to Cassie, right? Doesn't always happen. And then I'm going to cut just a little bit of a slight angle in my sentiment, and then we'll get ready to start assembling. Told you this was going to be an easy one. I'll put some more of that craft tacky on the back, and then I'll stick that down to my card base, leaving a little bit of a border on the left and right hand side. Then I am going to use that tacky glue all over the back of the ELIZA die cut that I cut out, because remember, your piece has texture, and so I want to make sure that this is going to stay put, so I just used little dots of it. I do love the tacky glue because it works really well. Things stick just very, very well, and you do have a bit of wiggle room using it. It just sometimes, like I said, my bottles seem to get clogged. If y'all have a better solution for that, I would love to know what that is. All right, I'll stick that down, and then I'm going to use some of the craft tacky on the back of my sentiment as well and stick that down. And that's actually going to finish off card number 2. That one packs a lot of punch for being such a simple card. Card number 3 is going to be a slimline, so I'm taking the dull pink cardstock that came in the kit and cutting off 4 inches. That will leave me with a 7-inch panel. And then I'm going to cut the smaller panel down to 3.5 inches because that's going to be my front panel for my card, and the other one will be the card base. I'm going to take some white cardstock and trim that down to be about 2.5 inches or something like that by 3.5 inches. I think 2 inches by 3.5 inches. And that's going to be just a little panel that I put on the front of that I'm going to stamp all over. And I'm going to take this border of snowflakes, and that's going to go on the top and the bottom. But before we do that, we'll stamp that panel. To do that, I've got some Simon Hurley Woof ink. It's just a very light gray ink. It's just perfect for this. I'm going to stamp the smaller snowflakes all over that background, so it'll make a nice little subtle background. And there's so many pretty little snowflakes in this set. Just a ton. I didn't even count. I should have, but there's a lot in there, which is great. So I'll just finish up stamping this panel. I do have to tell you that I have really missed making the Simon Says Stamp, like 5 cards, 1 kit videos. The last couple months have just been so crazy, and I'm glad to finally be back to doing it. Unfortunately, like I said, this kit is sold out, but I think that a lot of the pieces you can buy separately. So again, those will be linked down below. I stamped my sentiment using some of that blackout ink on 3, so it looks really nice on that subtle gray snowflake background. I'll put my 3.5 inch by 8.5 inch panel into my Misty, and then I'll put the border in there. I'll use a magic powder bag over the top and then ink up the snowflakes with some juicy embossing ink by Ink on 3. And the magic powder bag just keeps any of the excess powder that I'm pouring over the top from sticking to places I don't want it to. The embossing powder that I used is a Brutus Monroe Sterling Sparkle embossing powder. It's a beautiful silver embossing powder with little bits of sparkle in it. So it's just perfect for these little snowflakes. And then I'll heat set that till those are smooth and melted. And don't worry about the residue that gets left behind by the magic powder bag. That will be wiped away later. To save myself some time from having to clean off the stamp, I am using the back of the stamp packaging to stick that down on top. And then I'll move the stamp packaging away, and I'll also move my panel. Go through that same process of magic powder bag, ink up my stamp with the juicy embossing ink, and then stamp that down. And then again, cover that with that Sterling Sparkle embossing powder. And then once again, we'll heat set that till that is smooth and melted. And so, yeah, I had to make a slimline. You guys know that I really do enjoy my slimlines, and it seems like with every card kit, I have to make at least one slimline nowadays. I'm going to glue down my little white panel in between those borders. And I did cut a tiny strip of that silver holographic copper design paper, just a very small sliver, and I put a little bit of glue on one end of the sliver and then a tiny bit on my card base itself. That way I don't go too far with the glue. If I just glued on the silver cardstock itself, I might have had a gluey mess everywhere. And then I'll trim the excess away. So there's my card base. That was the leftover from before. That was 7 inches by 8.5 inches. So I scored it at 3.5 inches. That's going to be our card base. And then I'll take some of that same adhesive and I'll put that all over my back panel, and we'll adhere that down to the card base itself. But yes, this was a great kit to come back to. Like I said, it's probably been about 3 months since I've done one of these, and I was doing them every month. I feel terrible that I missed a couple of months, but like I said, it was just craziness around here. And so that's going to finish off card number 3. For card number 4, I'm going to start off with an A2 card base, which measures 5.5 inches by 8.5 inches and scored at 4.25. And then I'm going to take this beautiful piece of pattern paper and cut this down to fit the whole front of that. So that will be 4.25 inches by 5.5 inches. So like I said, that'll fit the whole front of it. I'm going to pull out one of the Heavy Doodle Stitch circle dies because my plan here is to make a spinner. So I need it to fit, my snowflake needs to fit right in the center of that. I cut out 2 of those ELIZA snowflakes using the silver holographic copper design paper. And then I am going to tape this paper that I have into place over the top of the card base. I want everything to line up perfectly, and so I just need to use a little bit of washi tape to tape that down, so when I run that through my die cutting machine, everything stays where it's supposed to. You don't want to glue anything in place yet. You just need it to be temporary as of now, because if you're going to make the spinner, things need to be able to be moved first. So I'll just take that washi tape. I put it over my pant leg, trying to make sure that it wasn't too tacky so that when I run it through my die cutting machine, nothing gets smushed into that, and then I can't get that off of there. And then, like I said, tape it in place, line up the stitch circle die, and then run that through the die cutting machine. And then we're left with these pieces. I am going to take the circle piece from the outside, and I'm going to glue it to the inside. The white piece will just, go away for something else. I'll just set that off to the side. But I'll use my craft tacky glue, and then I will right through the center of that hole line it up and put it in there. This way, everything gets lined up from the outside in or inside out, so it just looks like everything is cohesive and goes together. So yeah, that's on the inside. Our next step is actually to glue those 2 snowflakes together. And so I've got some invisible thread. This is like quilter's thread. And I'm cutting stuff that is longer than my card front because I want to make sure that I have lots of it, and that way I can cut off the excess. And you are definitely going to want to use that tacky glue all over the back of your snowflake. Just use it all over one of them. Make sure you hit the middle of, a straight line down the middle of one of the snowflakes. You'll take your invisible thread, you'll set that down in the center, and it'll stick to that tacky glue pretty nicely. And then you'll take your other snowflake and set it right over the top, lining everything up, sandwiching that invisible thread right in between those 2 snowflakes. Snowflakes are perfect ones to make spinner cards out of because they are meant to line up like this. And so once I've got everything really pushed together and that thread it's not going anywhere, this is where I'll line it up. And then I'm going to take a very strong adhesive. You wouldn't want to use your tacky glue for this. Your Scor-Tape would work best because you do not want that snowflake going anywhere. And a strong adhesive like a Scor-Tape works wonderfully. So I've got some 1/4 inch Scor-Tape. I'm also going to put another strip of 1/2 inch Scor-Tape down there at the bottom because there's room for it. I'll cut off that excess, and then I'm going to peel away all of that release paper. It's just easier this way. Once I get all of that release paper removed, Then we can take our snowflake with the extra long pieces of invisible thread and we can set that in the center and then tack that down to the Scor-Tape. Now I actually recommend putting another piece of Scor-Tape over the top of that so that it really doesn't go anywhere. I decided to use the liquid glue. My card is fine, but if you really want it to not go anywhere, put another piece of Scor-Tape over the top. And then this is where I'll take that panel and I'm going to try and put it down. Thankfully I didn't push too hard. This is why I always use liquid glue, because I just can't seem to get things lined up very well. Thankfully I did not destroy my panel. I was so afraid I did, but I didn't, thankfully. And then I lined it up. I was able to do it this time. But yeah, now you know why I always use liquid glue. I just have a problem lining things up perfectly. And at least with the liquid glue, I have a couple minutes or a couple seconds of wiggle room. All right, see? And then it spins so beautifully. And I'll trim off the excess of that invisible thread. And then I do have to stamp a sentiment. So I'll stamp my sentiment there. It says, "Snow glad we're friends." And then that's how our spinner looks. Isn't that fun? You can wind it up real good so that way when your recipient opens it, that snowflake really spins. Like how that one turned out. Card number 5 is going to be the same card. It's actually 2 cards, 2 mini Slimline cards, but they're going to be the same. So I've got 3 pieces of pattern paper. I've chosen one of those to be my card front. And what I'm doing is I'm going to put this inside of my Misty. I'm going to line it up at the very top because I'm going to cut this panel in half. Now in my mind this seemed to be the best way, or at least this is just where my mind went. I'm sure there's another way to do it, but this is just what I chose to do. I've got some Heffy tape, which is basically like a post-it tape, and I'm going to tape off at 3 inches so that each panel will have the same thing. And then I'm going to put the various snowflakes all over those backgrounds. They're already quite beautiful, but to add these snowflakes now just adds this extra element of beauty. So once I get all of those lined up, I'll close the door of the Misty. Then I'm going to use my magic powder bag over the top of that, and I'll ink up my snowflakes with some juicy embossing ink. It's just a clear sticky ink. Close the door, stamp that down, and then cover that with some alabaster embossing powder by Brutus Monroe. It is a very beautiful white fine detail embossing powder. It's my favorite. And then I'll wipe away any of the excess and then heat set that till that is smooth and melted. So you'll have these beautiful white detailed snowflakes over the top of that gorgeous background. I think this might be one of my new favorite things to do with pattern paper that is 6x6, is make mini Slimlines. And then you can make your own envelopes and they go through the mail just fine. Now I'll put this back into my Misty, take that same Heffy tape and cover that up. And then we'll just do the same process. Use the magic powder bag, sweep away any excess, and then ink up our snowflakes with that juicy embossing ink, stamp it down, cover that with that alabaster embossing powder, and there's that perfect line in between the 2 panels, basically, that just aren't cut away yet. Like I said, there's probably another way to do it. This is just how the direction my mind went, and it worked out fine, so we're good with it. Now I'm going to put that into my guillotine trimmer and trim those down so that they will be perfect panels for the front of my card bases, which are some more of that pattern paper that I am scoring at 3 inches. I do apologize. My camera stopped working. I think it just was tired from all the stamping. And so you'll see at the top of the screen what this card is going to look like down at the bottom. I used some Midnight Snack Simon Hurley Create ink to stamp out all of these circled images. They've got the 2 smaller ones, these 2 middle-sized ones, and 2 bigger ones. And then I used that Heffy Doodle stitch circle die to cut those out. And then now I'm just taping those down with a little bit of foam tape, lining those up. But this is just a fun way to make these really fun, easy mini Slimline cards that have a pretty inside and a pretty outside, but they were pretty easy to do. So there you go. That's card 5 and 6 technically. And so let's go ahead and take a look at all the cards that I made today. All of them were very simple to do. And I would actually like to know which one was your favorite. If you did have a favorite, have you ever tried mini Slimline before? What do you think? And go ahead and leave down in the comment section which one was your favorite card. And if you liked this video, please be sure to hit that like button and consider subscribing if you haven't already done so. And I just want to say thank you for all the love and support you guys leave. You guys are incredible. I love y'all, and I will see you very soon in another video. Bye, everybody.